I call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Will staff please do the roll call?
Morgan White,
Here.
Andrew Stump,
Here.
Grace Wilkin,
Here.
Jessica Lemcool,
Here.
Luke Westalker.
Here. And can you bring up the meetings from last time?
Sorry,
Can you bring up the meetings from last,
the minutes?
the minutes? Yes,
I don't
thank you.
have that here.
Okay.
I don't, and this is not connected to the network, so I can't
Okay.
bring it up.
So are there any corrections to the minutes?
Yeah, we're on approval of minutes from February 6, 2024. I would move for approval with a small addition that Scott will look into to include some of the public input. I thought I remembered Morgan got some people from the audience to speak, so just that's reflected in here. So I would move to approve them, noting that Scott will add that.
I'll second that.
Okay, the minutes are approved as all in favor. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes stand approved. So then we can move on to public input. So is there any public input tonight?
We really encourage public input from anyone who is willing to speak now or at the second chance, because it's important to get input from our community. Okay, I'll stop.
Okay, we can now move on to the staff report. Scott, can you please give your report?
Good evening, Commission. First, some updates. The city, as we've discussed before, is building 2 new fire stations. Staff presented 50% complete plans for those fire stations in January to Committee of the Whole. Based on some previous feedback from Mayor and Council goals, staff has established geothermal heating and cooling as part of the baseline design program for those 2 new fire stations. Construction is expected in 2025. Following construction and operation of the building, we'll collect 12 months of utility bills and then move forward with soliciting solar installation at those facilities. So the goal here is to build them with geothermal and then observe the actual electricity consumption at the buildings, and then solicit solar installations. And all of that work continues apace with the engineering division at Public Works. The geothermal Urbana-Champaign program, our bulk geo program, is moving forward with a 4th year. We are again partnering with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. They helped design and operate the program in the 1st year. We're gone for 2 years and now are back as the program administrator. And that's very positive, as they do a lot of great work for these bulk purchase programs. So we're moving forward with releasing a request for proposal from for installers in the weeks ahead, and we'll be scheduling some GeoPower hours soon. And then all the same, again, with our bulk solar program, Solar Urbana-Champaign, we'll be working with Midwest Renewable Energy Association, publishing an RFP for an installer very soon.
Scott, I
Yes.
think there's a typo in that. You say 4th year of solar.
Oh, sorry,
We're
that's
on year, what, 7 or 8?
eighth year for solar. Yes, 8th year of solar, 4th year of geo. Thank you. With respect to U-Cycle, we're moving forward with supporting a statewide battery collection effort with the Product Stewardship Council. Recycling Coordinator Courtney Kwong supports the Product Stewardship Council's development of product-specific stewardship regimes, whereby a fee is added at the point of purchase to something like paint or batteries, and that funds no additional cost disposal of those products, disposal and recycling of those products once consumers are done with them. So that type of arrangement has already been enacted in Illinois with respect to paint. The actual programming will be rolling out soon. And so the Product Stewardship Council is now moving on to working with battery manufacturers and retailers to set up the same regime for batteries. Any questions on that? Oh, before we move on to new business, I also wanted to go through a few slides with some preliminary data from our annual. I was waiting for that to be another agenda item, but we'll just include it in staff report, our annual data collection and analysis. So this isn't complete because we don't have all the data from all the contributors, but I'll show you what we've got so far. In terms of community-wide natural gas or methane gas consumption, we're down just a little bit from the previous year. I'd have to look at the data a little closer. I think all the sectors are kind of equally down. In terms of community kilowatt hour consumption, commercial and industrial are both down. Residential is a little bit down from the previous year. In terms of city facilities, we're kind of flat on the amount of methane natural gas we're using and kind of flat on the amount of electricity we're using.
Question on that.
Mm-hmm.
So does this include 2 fire stations now, and the 2 new fire stations will take them offline? Or I don't know what we have right now.
We have a fire station in this facility, this building, that will remain. We have 2 standalone fire stations that will be replaced, and then those buildings will be decommissioned and
Okay.
presumably sold.
So when those switch over, then we'll see the drop that would be reflected here with city facilities, right?
It would, if there is a drop, it'll show up in this chart, correct? And then we also have a fire station on campus in a University of Illinois building.
Does the electricity, so if there's solar on the future one, will you still have it here on electricity use, or will this be just non-solar use? I know your municipal ag has the RECs, but just
Yeah.
as far as that goes.
So, there are different ways to report that. The easiest way to report it is whatever's on the utility bills, which would not include electricity derived from solar. Of course, we'll probably sell the RECs, so technically we should probably add those kilowatt hours back in.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we're probably going to have to think about how we want to manage. Everyone sells the RECs, so we're going to have to.
Is there some solar generation that's in use for city facilities now?
There is a
directly?
small solar at the Landscape Recycling Center shop. And, we're not adding those kilowatt hours back in. Those show up as unused. And we are selling those renewable energy credits. So it's a question for you all to comment on about how you
Yeah.
want to report that.
I think we should show it. I'd recommend showing it as its own color and saying, solar power sold back to the grid. Something, we'd have to really explain it. Or maybe it's the same color. Because it is, we're generating, we're contributing to the grid, but then we're not keeping the RECs, so we have to be careful to not look like we're using the clean power. I think it makes sense to me to wait until we have the array, a larger array, a couple panels is what I think you're talking about at the one.
We are moving forward. We have published an RFP for rooftop solar for our new facilities storage building. So, the hope is that we're going to have several years in a row of some solar installations. So, yeah, in the next couple months, we have to decide
Or it could be solar generation on this electricity use and a new table of clean power used, which would have its own, like
Well,
if
we
we
wouldn't-
have the
we'd-
RECs or not the RECs, or how many RECs we
Yeah.
bought or whatever.
I mean, they're all sold for now.
They're all sold to the grid, but then aren't we getting all RECs right now in the municipal aggregation, or is that ended?
This isn't, city facilities are not part of municipal electric aggregation
Oh.
because it's for commercial, or sorry, it's for residential and small commercial. Yeah. So probably the best way to represent it is to go and get the
Right.
solar production and add it into this total.
I guess it depends on what you're trying to show. If you're just trying to show consumption, then it doesn't matter if you're selling it back. It's just consumption.
Well, it's not, I think she means
Yeah.
selling the RECs.
Sure.
We're not really selling back to the grid.
But yeah, I'm just saying like consumption is different than generation.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a separate graph or something else on top of this, but I think we would still want to know what the consumption is.
I think that the
overall
consumption
consumption.
would be in here,
Yeah.
right, on this electricity use. But the fact that that the city is selling, is generating clean power and contributing to the regional grid is worth pointing out, right? Like, and I don't know, do those have end dates for when the RECs would no longer be sold? So like,
Yeah.
you know, we have these things and selling the RECs is what's helping to finance it, but then in the end, we're getting it back, but then our RECs that are going into the grid are contributing to the greening of the grid, which is why, like, I think our local grid has over 10% clean power or carbon-free power currently. Part of that's nuclear.
I had another question here. If you could provide any context that you know behind some of these trends, like I'm imagining city facilities here was a lot COVID and remote work on this one on the right, right? And I'm not as sure about the left, the natural gas use, and then also the previous slide where commercial went down so much. I'm just wondering if you have some context, if it's like because businesses went out of business or because they got more efficient or went solar, or I'm wondering if you have any kind of context to these trends you could share.
For both city facilities and the community at large, I can speculate on what's contributing. For city facilities, it's everything you can imagine. We've made the buildings more efficient. We've decommissioned one building. The Civic Center is not in use. We have more remote work because COVID introduced remote work. So it's all of those things together, I think. So there's that. Community-wide, I think a lot of it is COVID-related recession. I saw a decline in industrial electricity use, and I don't think our industrial facilities just got more efficient in 1 year. I have to presume that that's just less operating hours. The Solo Cup factory, for instance, I presume they're not working anymore. I know that it's going away. So that's an example. Other than that, there's some increment of efficiency gains every year as equipment's replaced, but it's hard to speculate on what the contribution is.
Thank you. And did you say something about a solar factory? What did you say?
Solo Cup.
Oh,
Solo
Solo.
Cup.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
Solar factory? Solo, yeah. And maybe with Dart and some of these big ones that it's like, oh, we see this downward trend, which, sure, great, less carbon. And also just, what's really driving that is a question.
There's also those jobs go away, which is not what we want.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you have any others to add as you go, I appreciate your perspective.
Here is water consumption. We're pretty flat. If you look on the internet, you'll see our per capita water consumption is really low. So we're, and a lot of that must be attributable to irrigation. There are places that just irrigate their lawns a lot more than we do in Urbana. And that's in the United States, that's a huge proportion of potable water consumption. I think everything else is fairly flat. This is one that I really enjoy looking at and updating every year. we have some goals to really maximize the diversity of our urban forest, the part of it that we manage here at the city in the right-of-ways. And both genus and species, actually family too, we want to maximize diversity, so if a disease comes through and affects all of a particular genus or all of a particular species, we don't lose that many trees. So everything's trending in the right way. I think our goal was nothing over 5% in species and nothing over 15% in genus. So we've got basically one species and one genus above that, and red maple is part of Acer, so those are one and the same. So we're doing good. We're increasing diversity, and I'm really happy with that. Also, our vacant tree sites are trending in the right way. That trend line is very slow. I'd love to have an influx in investment in our arbor division so that we can set some bold goals to really have our vacant tree site count approach zero. You know, I think we remove something like several dozen trees every year, you know, for various reasons. They're old and falling apart or dangerous in some other respect. And so, you know, it's not that we're going to get to zero and stay there, because trees are always going in and coming out every year. But approaching zero is great. I think if you get under 100, you can really say, or under 50, you can really say we have a complete urban forest for what we manage. Related to that, I just learned this week, we've talked about this before, we have an interest, and we always work to make arrangements for interested parties. We have an interest in diverting tree removals, the log portion of the tree removal, to anyone local that wants to use that for urban lumber, rather than having it being chunked up, disposed of at the landscape recycling center, where it becomes firewood. We split firewood and sell that. But we have a ton of bulk lumber, more than we really need, way more than we have time to split into firewood. So we're looking for folks who want to take a log and plane it into lumber and reuse it. There are 3, 4, 5 different sawmills in town, so that's not the issue. It's just people wanting to use this material. Well, in our recent tree removal contract that was just finished a week or two ago, our vendor delivered 12 logs to the University of Illinois Fab Lab. So they were able to store that many and have an ambition to use that many in their projects, compared to some years where that would be zero, that count would be zero. That's amazing. I'm super excited about that. A variety of species, I didn't get the full count, just heard anecdotally. So I'm really excited about that. We want to keep doing that and building those relationships where we can divert logs to a higher and better urban lumber purpose. And it's worth noting that we do still have in storage out at the LRC red oak slabs that we paid to have milled. You can see pricing on the landscaperecyclingcenter.org for that. We also have hackberry. The red oak are now a year old, so they're getting seasoned. So someone can more readily use them right away. So I'm really excited that potentially the university is going to be able to really start throughputting this into final products. So this is the part that is not quite done, because I don't have all the information. There's 2 pieces of information still missing in our greenhouse gas inventory for the community this last calendar year, 2023. One is the solid waste data. City ordinance requires all licensed waste haulers to report their Urbana disposed of recycled amounts from all users. And it just takes a lot of reminders to get that data every year. And so we don't have all that collected from all the vendors yet. The other piece of information we don't have yet is the renewable energy credits retired through municipal electric aggregation. We subtract those because we pay for those. We retire them. We subtract those from our residential energy consumption. So I don't have that yet either. So that last 21 to 2023 decline you see in the chart, that's not what it'll finally end up with. That is with zero accounted for solid waste and residential at this time. What it's shaping up as you look at the table, my expectation is, and my hope is, that we're going to end up still just slightly underneath our 25% reduction by 2020. We're not buying as much renewable energy credits these years of our current municipal electric aggregation contract. The reason being the margin of savings was so small when we went out to bid last time, we just couldn't afford to buy the full freight of 100% renewable energy credits. So we're going to show more residential energy in our greenhouse gas inventory this 2023 calendar year.
Scott, that's awesome. So you're saying we hit that 25% by 2020 goal
We did.
in 2021 already,
Mhm.
and hope to expect to this year. And I was just wondering, I see on the graph it says 100% reduction by 2040, and your table says 80 by 2050. I didn't know if we had a set one.
Yeah, so there was two iterations. At one point, I think there was a 25% and an 80% goal, and then later on, there was a climate inheritance resolution passed, which set a goal of carbon neutrality. So I don't have 80%. I think probably the 25% and the 100% are the most relevant ones. Although I could put a line in there for 80% too.
You don't have to have a line necessarily, just it sounds to me like 80% by 2050 is a more accomplishable one than 100% by 2040. And it seems like also just to note that the biggest chunk being commercial is kind of outside of municipal control, right? Like you're doing a lot with bulk stuff and incentives and, doing stuff out there, but ultimately it seems like some of these things are outside of the city realm of control, right?
Challenging to influence. Our bulk solar and bulk geo programs are open to commercial, but almost all of the contracts are residential. We try to reach out and do advertising and so forth to commercial. We know from the industry folks that businesses take twice as long to make a decision to go from idea to implementation for renewable energy development as residential customers do. But even still, we're not getting nearly the commercial participation as we are in the residential. Reasons for that, hard to say. I'd love to, crack that nut if we could.
Is there any place in the city, like, say in the next 10 years, you'd be redoing the sewers underground?
Probably.
Because I would think you might want to just start now and target those areas as putting geothermal in, since you're pairing it up.
In sort of in a district fashion.
Yeah. If you know in 10 years you're going to be doing something, this is the time to kind of start thinking about how you can fund that.
So I read, are you working with the project in Chicago?
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
I think it's worth bringing up because I don't know if everyone's aware of that. I think it's a really great project.
So we're looking at a 4-block area, about 100 buildings, and trying to connect them all together. And we're using the alleyways as the place we'd put the boreholes and the piping, because that's where the utilities are along the street. So that's a place that there's not a lot of utilities. And they're trying to come up with the ownership model where the homeowners can own their system, and everything would be connected. You'd share the thermal energy between the buildings. And we're trying to come up with a module kind of configuration so you can then apply that same module to the next community or next neighborhood. So we're looking at the whole realm, how you do it technically, how you do it engineering-wise, how you do it economically, and having the neighborhood buy into the project, so.
Yeah, I'm interested in how the common assets are going to be owned and managed. I think that's the institutional innovation part of that project. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Because right now, ownership can only be by one entity, but they're trying to change the IRS
Ah, okay.
guidelines where you can have multiple owners of parts of the system.
Because there's going to be shared wells, yes, for the system?
Yeah, so there's gonna be like 36 wells in one block area. And those will be shared by all the building owners.
Then they'll have a lateral to each property, at which point it becomes private, and they have their own private heat exchanger.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for poking Andy to share. Scott, I don't know if there is opportunities with city stuff. It was making me think initially of the Dr. Ellis neighborhood work we're doing, but that's not digging stuff up necessarily, right? It's replacing the sewer laterals from inside, I think, is the main advantage to the way we're doing it, right? And
Yeah, and I think they're not digging up a long linear section. And Andy, the advantage, can you talk a little bit about the opportunity you're talking? Are you thinking if the city digs up an entire linear pipe and replaces it, is that the opportunity you're thinking about to add geothermal wells?
There was a town in Iowa, I'll pull it up here, that redid their whole downtown, and they replaced everything with geothermal pipes. I think the city of Elmhurst is thinking of the same type of project.
yeah, I love it. Thank you. Just encourage you
The
to
alleys
work
is-
with,
Sorry, the alleys is great because there's zero utilities there. I mean, that's, especially our alleys, which are mostly gravel anyway. It's not like you're breaking up concrete or asphalt, so.
And then there's a whole alleyway permeable pavement program, so that can also be tied into that whole project as well.
that's awesome. I love it. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, Scott, if you don't mind just keeping an eye on stuff going on at Public Works, if any of these present that opportunity, I think that'd definitely be interesting.
For sure.
Was there anything in the city goals about the sewer system? Because I saw some stuff about like assessing it, but is it planned to be redone soon?
I don't know that there was anything in mayor and council goals. Is that what you're thinking of? Or just more broadly construed goals?
I just know in mayor and council goals, they mentioned sewer stuff multiple times, but none of it was like actually replacing.
I think maybe there was a note on the Dr. Ellis subdivision. I'm done if we want to move on to the mayor and council goals agenda item. We can take a look at that.
So the city in Iowa's West Union.
West Union.
Yeah, and I was bringing that because I was trying to connect the commercial versus residential, and if you did the downtown, you could have the commercial part of it being met rather than the residential part.
Yeah.
I had a quick question about the tree biodiversity stuff. Do you know if the like genus and species are distributed across neighborhoods, or like if something happens to a species, like an entire neighborhood is wiped of trees?
We've never done that kind of spatial analysis per species or per genus. Probably there's a little bit of clustering, but I can't speculate much more than that.
And that's not in the nice GIS tree map we have?
I mean, it's all there, and someone who can download that into ArcGIS or something like that could do that spatial analysis. It's probably not, I can't personally do it, but it's probably not that hard for a competent GIS person.
I would say we've got a good tree inventory, right? So the data is out there.
The data is definitely, and
Yeah.
it's also available. Like if there's someone out there that wants to play around with it, they can just contact Public Works. We'll give them the data.
And then a quick idea of what Morgan was talking about with plotting the solar. I feel like if you do it as like cross hatches and stuff, so even if usage is growing, you can extrapolate total consumption and how much is being bought from the grid and just add it like that.
Anything else before moving on to new business?
I have one quick question. I guess it's less a question as a request. Could you check what the official goals are on the sustainability side? I think we made a decision in this commission to recommend that it was the 100% by 2040. I remember the conversation because it was quite, it's difficult to set a goal when you don't know how to get to it, but if you don't have a goal, how do you find the, motivation to try to get to it? So I think that's where we landed in the commission, but I don't know if it was then passed at the council as an official city goal. So would you please check
It
in?
is. It is, in fact. It's
The
the climate
100?
100% by 2040 is the climate and inheritance resolution. That's the most recent goal and the most aggressive.
Thanks.
And that includes commercial stuff?
That is everything in the community, not city facilities, but everything within the corporate
Okay.
boundaries.
Because currently I did the math and it's 52% commercial of the total energy usage, so.
And I'll just add also, though, that there's, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act requires a shift in the, energy production facilities across the state, which is to get to carbon neutral. I think all of them have an end date for public and private, which is not all of them, is 2045. So it's pretty close to when we could be pretty close to that amount by 2040, and some of them have dates that are earlier as well.
That's a good
So
point.
it's not as implausible as it was when we said it.
It's a good point. When we say carbon neutrality, if all the power plants out there making electricity are renewable, that contributes to our goal. So it's not necessarily everything that we do here. A business may use the same amount of electricity from the grid every single year forever, but if that grid electricity gets greener, then we're getting towards our goal.
Does nuclear count as renewable in this metric?
It counts as carbon neutral.
Okay.
Other questions or new business?
Yeah, is there any new business
It's
or
the
old business?
New business is the discussion of mayor and council strategic goals.
So I guess, was there any unfinished business or can we move on to new business?
No unfinished business.
Okay. So with the, I added this to the agenda because I think it would be interesting to kind of align some of our goals with what council and the mayor are looking to do over the next 2 years and see if we can kind of like tailor some of the things. So I don't know if we can just quickly go through this document and look to see if anything stands out to people. There are 3 like directly sustainability related things, but not sure if other people saw other things in it.
Can you just confirm, so this says it was for vote. Was it voted and approved, so these are now, or is it still in discussion?
These are not approved, so there is definitely still an opportunity. We're going to discuss them at least once or twice before they're officially passed.
Thanks.
So like, for instance, if we want to tailor one of the sustainability ones and say, maybe change the wording a little bit, that might help us in the next year or 2 do things.
I think that's a great idea. Which ones should we look at first? I don't know, should we go through all of them, or are there a couple to pick out?
Yeah, I think you've got it on specifically what I feel like sustainability, yeah, that infrastructure 3.3, but they all can be, especially under a broader umbrella of sustainability and equity, but that's where I think they mostly fall.
And Luke, here I see the what you were referring to, I think earlier, complete sanitary sewer asset management plan.
Do we know what that means?
So with the asset management plans that Public Works has been pursuing, domain by domain, what the big picture is they're trying to evaluate what is it everything we own, what is the maintenance cycles, and what does that imply for an annual expenditure? In all of these things, what results is we are not spending, even close to what, the replacement rate would require. So how do we, move from where we are now, not to what the math says is our annual expenditure to keep up with replacing the assets as they age, but just get closer. So that's kind of the idea. And then that'll also direct staff work on, which assets are the most aged that should be, on the list for replacement next. And then also for things like roads, they're also looking at, scoring the level of wear and tear so that we can prioritize the worst first.
And I think it would be really fun to have a presentation about the SWAMP, right? Stormwater Asset Management Plan, and I love that the acronym is SWAMP. Is that Carmen, right? I was just blanking on the name, right? Carmen
Is Carmen, yep.
Yeah, that would be so interesting. If you want to learn more, that would be a fun presentation to have someday in the future.
What's the acronym EQL?
Equity and quality of life.
And then to that other point in 301, I think the last round we had, as you said, completed some of those asset assessment and management plans for like roads and sidewalks.
What is the local motor fuel tax? That seems mildly related to sustainability.
So we have a tax at the pump. The state has a tax, I don't know if the federal government does, but the state has a tax at the pump, gasoline pump, diesel pump, as does the city. And that money pays, at the city level, pays for roadway repair projects.
It's the local motor fuel tax contributes to that, and the state motor fuel tax contributes to it for the municipalities. The local motor fuel tax is a really good thing, in my opinion, from a sustainability perspective, because it's people who are choosing to drive contributing to the maintenance of the pavement locally. And we have a lot of active transportation users who are not really, like a bicyclist is not creating wear and tear on the pavement. And so this a motor fuel tax, both the state and the local one, help de-incentivize driving. And it's a minimal amount. I don't know the exact amount, but it's not huge. And it is, we're nowhere near what gasoline costs or what motor fuel costs in other countries, and especially Europe. And if we were, it'd be probably twice what it is or even more here. And maybe we'd get more bicyclists and walkers and transit users. Very much for that. Can you scroll so that 3.3 is a little higher on the screen? My eyes are going bad. Thank you.
I guess one question I have about 3.3C is just like, what does that look like? Create a grant program for community environmental projects. It seems vague. Maybe it's purposely vague, so like it can still be kind of envisioned, but just kind of curious about that.
That is a budget amendment from the budget that is coming to an end this year, this June. It's $100,000 for community grants, environmental groups, community groups, and the grants management division is going to be designing some rules around that in order to implement a program that distributes some grants to some environmental projects. So I presume that, that money was put in the current budget that we're getting close to the end, that money will roll over is my expectation, and it'll still be available in the next fiscal year for that expenditure.
Looking at 3.2B, does that include getting someone to apply for some of the more like sustainability-related grants?
So the city has a stormwater utility. What that means is every parcel that is
I think
contributing.
he was asking about the other one, 3.2B.
Oh. 3.2B. So this is a goal from mayor and council to ensure there is enough staff to pursue the $1 million, multi-million-dollar public infrastructure grants, sustainability grants coming from the federal government. Historically, the city's grants management division has had staff to pursue and manage the community development block grants, which is been substantially about housing development. So the idea here is to make some staff time available for pursuing these other types of federal grants.
I'm thinking for 3.3A, it would be nice to include, maybe it's like at the end, and initiate at least one. Because I remember sometimes, the goal is to evaluate it. Okay, we evaluated it, but we didn't do it. And I think it'd be really good to have something in here that says, evaluate these possibilities and choose at least one to do.
So the good news on that is we've got mayor and council support to do GEO at the 2 new fire stations. Every day, costs go up on these type of projects, so I'm hopeful that those won't be value engineered out. We also have a budget amendment that was passed at council to fund the solar array on the facilities the city storage facility, which is the RFP that's published and active right now. So that's active. It has a specified earmark in the capital improvement plan, and we have commitment and are moving forward with design for GEO at the 2 fire stations. So I'm confident that these are actually going to roll. And then, as I mentioned before, we have a staff commitment from top to bottom to collect the bills and solicit solar installations at these 2 fire stations after they're built. When we get closer to that, I think the mechanics will again be to put those estimated dollar amounts in the capital improvement plan.
I'm trying to keep my mouth shut and stay out of it as a dual role, and I'll have plenty to say when we get in there. But just, encourage you to, if you're interested, make recommendations as SAC on some of these. Personally, I think 3.3A is, I keep thinking vague, dull, boring, waste of a number. A lot of things on here got cut out because we were trying to keep it to an ABC. And there was like 10 things, and this was the end of like hours long stuff going through other things. And it was just like, all right, we're taking the top 3, that's it. So I would just say, from my perspective, we're not married to a lot of these. B, I think, is an important one for staff that kind of logistically needs to get done, but it could move up to 3.1C. Anyway, we could make some room here. C is already in the budget. A, I think, is just a waste because, as Scott said, we already committed to geothermal and a few other things. And I would like to point out that although we made the recommendation to City Council, which didn't get actually made into a resolution for them to pass for any action to happen, the bag fee is not reflected in here. And that's one of the ones that got cut, and one of the ones that I'm feeling a lot of frustration, because then it loops back around to, well, we need a formal approval from council, but it just like didn't make the cut here. So I'm a little frustrated with some of that thing, and I did just want to point that out.
Yeah, I guess as someone who doesn't really know a lot about this process, it does feel kind of just like these are some random things. Yes, these things look good, but like, are these all the things? I don't know. I would assume it can't be. And I am with Morgan, evaluate is weak, you know, evaluate is not doing. And yeah, so looking at 3.3A, so.
I'll add to 3.3A that, you know, I've been at the city for 11 years, and that sort of language, whatever strength it is, has never appeared in mayor council goals before. And I'll also add that renewable energy assets have never been in the capital improvement plan before this year. So I think these are a good turn of events.
Scott, has there ever been, or is there a program for monitoring renewable energy systems?
Monitoring in what way?
Their operations, so you could do you can do evaluate of the feasibility, but then you could do a study of how they perform.
So well, I can speak to the one we have. We have access, you know, online access to the production. I think it's at the day-to-day level. I think it's that granular. We don't do any analysis on it, but that's possible. Just takes time.
I think the heat pumps for the geothermal systems might give you information that you could use, or you may just think about putting flow meters on each going in, coming out, and that would give you another sense of.
Would flow meters be part of the system anyway?
Not necessarily, because it'd just be inside the unit, but I know on campus they're interested in knowing how much energy they're avoiding. So they're putting flow meters and temperature meters on the actual pipes going in and out of the building.
And there's an energy dashboard for the campus instructional facility online that you can search for it, I guess, that shows the geothermal energy that is being avoided by the partial geosystem there. It's a full it's totally geothermal for part of the energy, is what I'm trying to say.
So since this section is infrastructure, could we recommend having something about plastic bags, or is that relevant to this section?
I will say, if I may, that in the previous round, that's linked there from 2022 to 2023, it does have explore green revenue, i.e. plastic bags, yeah, and green revolving funds. So that idea was already in there to explore it on the previous round. So I think that it's absolutely not unprecedented. And also to Scott's point about 3.3A, I hear you there, and I would also just say that also something similar was also in the previous round to evaluate options to enhance sustainability and climate resiliency on city-owned property and facilities. And I think one could argue that we have complete that and move on, and if we're making space for some.
That was on the previous iteration of council goals. Gotcha.
Is there a way that we can add something to 3.3A that's examples, or like even evaluate the practical feasibility and begin implementing these capital projects such as geothermal and solar, which we know is already going to be happening, but it makes the language a little more direct, like you're actually doing something?
Yeah, you can, the world's your oyster, man. Yeah, I think the SAC can make an official recommendation or discuss it here or however you want to do it. But yeah, I think the possibilities are out there.
And Grace, do you think people would be supportive of moving 3.3B to 3.1C? Is that like, do you know if that would be contentious?
Yeah, I can't speculate to speak for others. I will say that with this process, we do plan to have another discussion or two. And that was, I think, maybe some of the confusion where it did come up, to committee of the whole, and then it stayed there because we've had some council members out recently, and we wanted to wait till everyone's back together. So I imagine that some things will move around, that this is not the final version, and so that's why we weren't comfortable passing it without everyone there to rediscuss. So I think that some things will move around, and it's not out of the ordinary to suggest moving things or changing something.
Do you have the previous version of the bag tax that you said was cut from one of the previous drafts? Or, because you said there are like 10-ish options.
Yeah, I do. I'm computerless at the moment, but that is,
The language
Out
exists
there.
somewhere in the draft.
yeah, in the minutes, I think that we did have a full spreadsheet of some language as we've gone through some of these drafts. Will,
It exists. I
Will
mean,
will know.
Yeah.
If you don't mind checking with Will, or I can check my computer sometime.
I actually just threw away that, or recycled that print today.
Okay. Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about, and that was made publicly available in the minutes, but I think it had some draft language ideas. But I do think there's a chance, I don't know for sure, that we would finalize that before the next SAC meeting in a month. I'm not sure exactly the timeline, but.
So what's the best course of action then? Can we like just make a suggestion, go as public comment?
Yeah, so we could choose here to, we could have I would like to make a motion. Let's say that better. I move that we officially endorse as the SAC, adding into the sustainability goals for the mayoral and city goals for this coming set, adding in the moving forward with the bag tax recommendation that we had previously submitted. I know that was really long, but I think our recommendation was to invest in studying it, right? Wasn't it to invest in studying it, or was it to actually implement the bag tax? That's what I can't recall.
I think it was to study for a year.
Right. We need to complete that effort as a community and then do it if it makes sense.
Sure. I feel like, yeah, again, Explore It was already on the last round since 2022, and I think we have done that.
Yeah, it does feel explored. I mean, we know of lots of other cities that have done it, so it's kind of like, do we rip the Band-Aid? I mean, I see something I notice when I go through any city these days is just the immense amount of trash blowing around everywhere. So when I think of like infrastructure, I mean, I know that's not like but yeah, the trash, like what about the trash? And this is one way to stop a massive flow of just really trashy trash. I mean, it's just like the worst because it's like really skinny and just stuck in the trees. And yeah, so I say like, let's get it on there. I mean, there's room for it. And why not?
So nobody seconded mine, so you
Oh,
can
I'm
make.
seconding.
No. You want to make a new motion.
Okay,
That
I
is
will new
different from what
motion.
I said, because I was talking about I think our recommendation was to study it some more.
Okay,
So
I
your
misunderstood your
recommendation-
motion.
what
So
is
I
your
am
motion?
motioning to let us put the bag tax on this. We're saying as SAC that the bag tax should just be on here because we've talked about it. We know about it. There's been research. We presented on it. And really, what's the point of waiting another year or two? Just many more thousand bags floating around those fields. So,
And I will second that.
thank you, Morgan.
So all in favor of that motion?
Yes.
Aye.
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 And I just want to say, what we were motioning for is that the SAC endorses. So then this becomes, I don't know if Luke needs to say something like follow up, or if Scott can follow up with SAC endorsed adding to implement the bag tax into the city goals.
What I'll do is I'll take the video and take the language verbatim as it came out of Jessica's mouth, and then write that in a resolution and send it up the chain of command.
And then also to clarify, just since this is a discussion and there's not an official piece on the floor, I don't know if my procedural red flags were just kind of like going off with that about I think we could say, as a result of our discussion that, we've produced some thoughts on it because the goals were on our thing here and kind of getting a consensus for how people are feeling. I think that makes sense. But I just didn't want to get into a whole other separate resolution thing that's not on the agenda because we have to publicize that. We also talked earlier about, in the presentation, about the tree canopy, and Scott has mentioned some great tree plans to me, kind of off the record. I don't know if that's anything else we wanted to consider.
Well, just to zoom out a little bit on where we stand, we have long-established practice of diversifying our tree canopy, our species, and we're doing quite good on that. We have, if I'm just off the top of my head, something like 12,000 or 14,000 planted street trees. We have about 4,000 vacant tree sites. We understand that the best practice for pruning trees, which keeps them safe and makes them live longer, is to cyclically, proactively prune all the trees every 7 years. We're at something like a 10-year cycle. We're way beyond that. We need more resources to get to the proper pruning cycle. That'll help us maintain what we have. Like any asset, they need maintenance. It'll help us maintain what we have, make them live longer, and make them safer. Once we get to that point where we're good with what we have, I think it would be a really great goal for this city and any city to talk about completing their urban forest. So in the sense of completing urban forest here, we know we have about 4,000 places that are worthy of having a street tree planted. So having that 4,000 vacants approach zero would be, I think a good example of completing the urban canopy. So it's really, to get there though, you got to take that first step of getting to maintenance levels that are appropriate to the assets you already have.
So it would be really cool to get close to zero. I was already feeling that when we were just watching the prior part of this presentation. But what you're saying is it's kind of pointless to do that if you don't have a plan for like maintaining the other many trees that we have.
Yeah, like any asset or any collection of assets, if you can't maintain what you got, you probably shouldn't add to the number.
So how much does that cost? Like, what would it take? Like, what does that really look like? The maintaining the 7-year prunings,
Yeah, so to get to what we think to get to a proper maintenance of the assets we have now is one additional arbor tech position and another piece of equipment like a pickup truck.
And could you remind me too, is there 1 or 2 vacancies now? And we were going to contract out, but that had some issues, right?
There are 2 arbor tech positions, and they're both vacant right now. So the city arborist, Kevin Sanderson, is moving what would have been personnel expenditures into contract expenditures in an attempt to contract out some tree pruning. That's not something we've ever done, so they had to write that RFP, that request for proposal or request for quote, from scratch. That's being published, my understanding is this week, and so it'll be open for a couple of weeks. Hopefully, we'll get some competitive bids and hire some tree pruning and get some of that done this fiscal year. And then I think they have posted the Arbor Tech position already, but don't quote me on that. But I think that is posted.
Is that the two initial positions or the additional third
We've had,
position?
yeah, great question. We've had those just in fairly short sequence. Both of those staff persons have taken jobs at other places, and so they both became vacant in a short period of time. So even when those were full, we still needed a third position if we want to get to that industry standard of every 7 years pruning trees cyclically.
I guess for me, big picture, that was a lot more of maybe an affordable option than I was expecting for that much pruning to be happening, but a truck and a person and a job, yeah, seems reasonable.
Now we add 4,000 more assets to it. We might need a fourth person, but that's in the future.
I guess for a city of trees, or the city of trees,
No free lunch.
yeah. It would make sense, though.
So Scott, if SAC were to consider adding that to the recommendations, do you have like a suggested way to word that? Like add one, full-time equivalent Arbor Tech and truck.
Yeah, I think that's more or less it. Add one FTE of an Arbor Tech, and I don't know if there's a different word other than truck. I have to think about that for a second.
Vehicle, put it in the verb, yeah.
Vehicle's a little more generic. That's a good one.
Which section would it go in?
I think that's infrastructure.
Okay.
I mean, I've been saying using this phrase for a few years that street trees are essential urban infrastructure. They're like sidewalks.
So then could the language also have something to the effect of creating the positions with the goal of moving towards zero? So maybe that's in there, and possibly even keeping it open to the future positions if needed? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, for the purpose of adequate street tree maintenance.
I feel like it would fit in the 3.1C potentially, or in 3.1 somewhere. But I know, I understand why people like 3, but we may just need a D in there, for those plastic bags. So, yeah.
What is an infrastructure quality consideration? Because when we don't prune our trees often enough, their quality and health declines, and they don't live as long. More prone to to limb falls.
Yeah, and you've also described them as assets repeatedly, so that feels like just like a very natural place to put it, so.
So it sounds like we have modifying the language of 3.3A and then adding a 3.3D about the plastic bags, and then adding a 3.1C about the arbor maintenance. So how's the best way to combine all of that and have that communicated to council?
I don't know that you necessarily need to slot them in a particular place today, especially since you're constructing these resolutions on the fly. I think the format of the first resolution is satisfactory. It's just communicating the substance of the idea.
I think in the past, Stacy has wrote a letter from the SAC as chair on things before, right? Is that?
I think so there's been some instances in the past with the SAC where there was a notion of a resolution before the meeting, and a formal draft resolution was written. with space for the chair to sign off on it and all that sort of thing. And that works when someone knows they're bringing a proposal for a resolution to the meeting. When it's on the fly related to an agenda item, I don't know that it's going to be, a letter from the chair, although the chair is welcome to write a letter on his own recognizance.
So would you write up and send it then? I'm still not tracking here.
So what I've done in the past, when there's been a resolution on the fly from an agenda item, is I will take the verbatim language from the video, write it into a resolution document. If it seems like it needs some explanation, I might put a memo on top of that, and then I send that through the chain of command to leadership. So I would send it to the Public Works Director.
And then would we vote on it again here at SAC? Because I don't know that we
No, I-
can have a resolution come out of tonight's meeting from this discussion. So I
thought-
think we could
I thought we
write up
could.
and pass along the message.
I think we can because it's on the agenda. So we're making a resolution based on this agenda item.
But it's a discussion. It's not an
Does it
action
have to
item.
say like for vote on the agenda item? Is that what you mean?
If we were to pass a resolution, yeah, I think we need the resolution number. It has to be publicly posted and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we can just after this meeting write up something because we have to vote on it and have the language and have it posted. I think we can communicate what happened from this discussion, right, in a recommendation. This was our discussion we had on it. Here was, SAC's recommendations after this discussion. But I'd say check. That's just what
Yeah,
my OMA red flags are going off about.
Yeah, I think in strict construction, you're probably right. I mean, two ways to move forward would be, I can draft a formal resolution on the basis of what was discussed and then put it on the agenda for SAC next month. That may come after the final vote of mayor and council goals. Another thing we could do is I can just write a memo that says the SAC discussed and agreed that they were in favor of this, and here's the verbatim language that they used, and put that in a memo and send that through the chain of command too. So those are two different pathways.
It seems like the secondary pathway is really the only way of making sure the information gets to the people that need it in time, so seems like, I don't know, the best pathway forward.
But we have some specific language with respect to plastic bags. Did anyone want to propose some specific language I can quote for tree?
Just hoping my language was specific enough for that first one, but, yeah, I can think of some tree language, but I'm sure other people have tree ideas. Might need a minute.
What I had as a draft was just add a FTE arbor technician vehicle for adequate tree maintenance. What should we add to that, or?
With the goal of pursuing the urban forest status, as soon as possible or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you said some things earlier I was writing as you were saying was, that arbor tech and vehicle with goal of maintaining and maybe say completing urban canopy. Is that too lofty of a goal to start putting in there? You want to start with just maintaining?
Probably need more resources to move from, whatever it is, 12,000 we have now to 14,000. It's hard to say. I think, getting to, proper maintenance is its own goal. But it's your resolution. You do what you like.
So I do think, Luke, if we can add the word maintenance or maintaining, like the current canopy or whatever, and then maybe is there a way that we can put in there, like about, and I don't know, future considerations as we move to urban forest status or something?
We could say, and decrease the number of vacant tree spaces. I forget the term that's
Vacant tree site is what I call it.
Yeah.
tree sites.
Yeah, all of these are great options.
So add FTE, arbor technician, vehicle for adequate tree maintenance to maintain current urban canopy status and begin to pursue urban forest status by decreasing vacant tree sites.
I don't think urban forest status is really a term. It's really and instead of and begin to pursue urban forest status, strike that, just say and decrease vacant tree sites. Did you have and between the word FTE, technician, and a vehicle? Okay, I just didn't hear it.
So I think that's good. I can put that in a memo. If, in the event that council doesn't pass the goals before the next SAC meeting, Luke, the chair, and I can discuss and put, an actual draft resolution on the agenda if you also choose to do that.
Is that also something that Luke could choose to do without us weighing in now on whether to choose to do that
Correct.
here? Okay. Thanks. We don't use Robert's rules in the meetings I go to on campus, most of them, only the SSC ones.
So I can send a letter, it's just not a resolution.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, I would say either I can write a memo describing what you all discussed, you can write a letter describing it. I don't know that it needs to be both, but you and I can work that out in the coming days.
and then quickly reading what we had for 3.3A onto the record. It was implement sustainability improvements in city facility capital projects such as geothermal heating and photovoltaic solar installations. Did we want to add anything to that or edit that?
I guess just the English person, I maybe just implement instead of implementing, because they all start with verbs and not gerunds, but yeah, killing it.
You're saying it should be implement?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other discussion items for this? Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Oh, I can just adjourn, okay. The meeting is adjourned at 8:12. Thank you.